Hello. My name is Lisa. I'm 6 years old. And for as long as I can remember, I hid behind silence when it came to English. Not because I didn't study hard, not because I couldn't pass exams, but because I was terrified of being laughed at. I was afraid of saying the wrong word, of mispronouncing a sentence, of sounding stupid. I spent years memorizing words and grammar rules. I could get full marks on written tests. I could understand English movies with subtitles. I could even write emails in English without mistakes. But when someone spoke to me in English, I froze. I would lower my head, mumble a few unclear words, and quickly change the subject. I would pretend I didn't hear, pretend I didn't understand. Anything to avoid speaking. People around me said, "Lisa, you're so good at English on paper. Why don't you just speak up?" They didn't understand. It wasn't that I couldn't speak. It was that I was too scared to try. Every time I thought about opening my mouth, a voice in my head would scream, "You'll mess up. They'll laugh at you. You're not good enough." I grew up in a city where English is everywhere. On billboards, in coffee shops, in conversations between strangers. I dreamed of being able to join those conversations. I wanted to talk to the foreign barista at my favorite cafe. I wanted to study abroad and make friends from all over the world. I wanted to apply for international internships that required fluent English. Every time I saw someone speaking English freely, my heart ached with envy. I knew that English was the key to a bigger world, but I was too scared to turn it. Do you know what it feels like to have a voice, but be too afraid to use it? It feels like being locked in a room with a door wide open, yet you're too scared to step out. You stand in a group of people speaking English, wanting to join in, but you stay quiet. You meet a foreign friend, wanting to chat, but you can only smile and nod. You have so much to say, but you keep it all inside, because fear is louder than your voice. One rainy evening, I sat by the window, watching the raindrops fall. I opened my phone and saw a video of a girl my age speaking English confidently. Even though she made mistakes, she laughed at her own errors, kept speaking, and looked so free. In that moment, I thought, why can't that be me? Why am I letting fear control my life? I took a deep breath and said out loud, to no one but myself, "Lisa, enough is enough. It's time to stop hiding. It's time to speak." That night, I made a promise to myself. Not a big, unrealistic promise. Not I will become a native speaker in a month, but a small, brave one. I will speak English out loud every single day. Even if it's just one sentence, even if I make 100 mistakes. I knew that fear thrives in silence, and the only way to beat it was to speak. To keep speaking, even when my hands shook, even when my voice cracked, even when I wanted to give up. This is my journey, not the journey of a genius. Not the journey of someone who was born with a gift for languages. Just an ordinary girl like you, who was tired of being silent, tired of being afraid, tired of letting fear steal her dreams. In the next chapters, I will show you exactly how I went from hiding in silence to speaking English with confidence. I will show you the simple daily habits that changed everything for me. I will show you how I went from being too scared to say a single word, to having conversations in English that felt natural, easy, and fun. And in the final chapter, I will share a recording of my voice, imperfect, but brave. A voice that once was too scared to speak. But now subscribe to our channel, because your voice matters too. You don't have to be perfect to speak English. You just have to be brave, and we'll be with you every step of the way. The morning after I made that promise, I woke up with a mix of excitement and terror. My hands were sweaty, my heart was racing, and I kept asking myself, what if I can't do this? What if I freeze again? I didn't have a mirror in my bedroom, so I walked to the bathroom, where a small, foggy mirror hung above the sink. The light was soft, and I could see my own reflection, nervous, but determined. I stood in front of the mirror and took a deep breath. I had planned the simplest sentence possible. My name is Lisa. 4 words, that's all. But when I opened my mouth, Nothing came out. My throat felt tight, like someone was squeezing it. I closed my eyes, took another breath, and tried again. My name is Lisa. It was quiet, shaky, and I stumbled over the words, but I said it. I actually said it out loud. I opened my eyes and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look perfect. I didn't look confident. But I looked brave, braver than I had ever been before. I repeated the sentence again. My name is Lisa. Clearer. Then again, and again. 10 times, 20 times, until the words felt less scary, until my voice stopped shaking, until I could say it without closing my eyes. After a few minutes, I tried another sentence. I am learning to speak English. It felt strange at first, like I was borrowing someone else's words, but I kept going. I am learning. That day, I practiced in the bathroom for 10 minutes. 10 minutes of speaking to my own reflection. 10 minutes of facing my fear. 10 minutes of proving to myself that I could do it. The mirror taught me my first lesson. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is speaking, even when you are scared. I didn't become fluent that day. I didn't even become good. But I took the first step. The hardest step. I opened my mouth, and I spoke. And that step was enough to change everything. When I left the bathroom, I felt lighter. Like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a prisoner of my own fear. I felt like I had taken back control. That small, shaky "my name is Lisa" was more than just a sentence. It was the beginning of my freedom. On day R, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror again. I was still nervous, but I felt a little more confident than the day before. I had spoken out loud once, and I had survived. I knew I could do it again. This time, I wanted to try longer sentences, I thought. If I can say longer sentences, I'll be one step closer to fluency. So I picked a sentence. I drink a cup of coffee every morning before work. I opened my mouth and tried to say it as fast as I could. I drink a cup of coffee every morning before work. It came out jumbled, unclear, and I stumbled over the words. I felt frustrated. Why can't I say this smoothly? I asked myself. I tried again, rushing even more. And again, each time, it got worse. I was getting angry with myself, ready to give up. But then I remembered something my English teacher had once said. It's better to speak slowly and clearly than to speak fast and be misunderstood. I took a deep breath and slowed down. I broke the sentence into small parts. I drink a cup of coffee every morning before work. I said each part slowly, clearly, making sure I pronounced every word correctly. Then I put it all together. I drink a cup of coffee every morning before work. It was slow. It wasn't perfect, but it was clear. I could hear every word, and it felt good. That day, I learned a valuable lesson. Fluency is not about speed. It's about clarity. It's about saying each word with intention, not rushing to get to the end. I started practicing slow, clear speaking every morning. I picked simple sentences about my daily life. I wake up at ba o'clock. I eat breakfast at ba dan senshifen. I take the bus to work. I said each sentence slowly, pausing between phrases, making sure I pronounced every word correctly. At first, it felt silly. I was speaking so slowly, like I was talking to a child. But I kept going, because I realized that slow speaking was helping me build confidence. When I spoke slowly, I didn't feel rushed. I didn't feel like I was going to mess up. I could think about each word, and I could correct myself if I made a mistake. After a few days, something amazing happened. I was at the cafe, and the foreign barista asked me, "What would you like to drink?" Without thinking, I said slowly, clearly, "I would like a latte, please." The barista smiled and said, "Coming right up, Lisa." He had understood me. I had spoken English to a real person, and he had understood me. I walked back to my table, my heart racing with excitement. It was a small moment, but it meant everything. I had spoken slowly, clearly, and confidently. And it had worked. That night, I wrote in my journal. Today, I spoke to a stranger in English. It was slow, but it was clear. I am getting better. One slow sentence at a time. After a week of slow, clear speaking, I was making progress. I could speak simple sentences without shaking. I could even have short conversations with the barista at the cafe. But I noticed something. I was still too afraid to make mistakes. Every time I spoke, I would overthink every word. I would stop mid-sentence if I thought I had mispronounced a word. I would correct myself over and over again, until the sentence sounded perfect. But this constant correcting made me pause, made me nervous, made my speaking feel forced. One day, I was practicing a sentence. I went to the park with my friend yesterday. I said it once, but I thought I had mispronounced yesterday, so I stopped and corrected myself. I went to the park with my friend. Yes, jande. Then I said it again, and again, until I was sure I had pronounced it correctly. By the time I was done, I was exhausted, and I didn't want to speak anymore. I sat down and thought, why am I so afraid of making mistakes? Why do I need to be perfect? That's when I realized my biggest enemy wasn't my lack of skill. It was my fear of mistakes. I thought that if I made a mistake, people would laugh at me, that I would look stupid, that all my hard work would be for nothing. But then I remembered the video I had watched that rainy evening. The girl who laughed at her own mistakes and kept speaking. She wasn't perfect, but she was confident. And people didn't laugh at her. They listened to her. I decided to change my mindset. I decided to stop fearing mistakes. I decided to see mistakes as part of the process, not as failures. I made a new rule for myself. When I speak, I will not correct myself. I will keep speaking even if I make a mistake, even if I mispronounce a word, even if I use the wrong grammar. I will keep going. At first, it was hard. Every time I made a mistake, I wanted to stop and correct myself, but I forced myself to keep going. I said sentences like, I eated breakfast this morning, instead of ate, and she go to the store yesterday, instead of went. I didn't correct myself. I just kept speaking. And you know what? Nothing terrible happened. No one laughed at me. No one judged me. In fact, when I kept speaking, people understood me better, because they weren't distracted by my constant correcting. They were listening to what I had to say. I started practicing this every day. I would pick a topic and speak for a few minutes, intentionally making mistakes, and not correcting myself. At first, it felt awkward, but over time, it became easier. I started to see mistakes as a sign that I was trying, that I was growing. One afternoon, I was talking to the barista again. I said, I go to the library every Saturday to study English. I knew I had used the wrong tense, but I didn't correct myself. I just kept speaking. I like the library because it's quiet and I can focus. The barista smiled and said, that's a good habit. I also like to read in quiet places. He had understood me, even with my mistake. And he didn't care about the mistake. He cared about what I was saying. In that moment, I felt free. I realized that mistakes are not the enemy. Fear of mistakes is. And once I let go of that fear, my speaking became more natural, more confident, and more fun. By day 2, I was more comfortable. I could speak slowly and clearly, and I wasn't afraid of making mistakes. But I still had a problem. I only spoke English when I was alone, or when I was talking to the barista. I didn't have anyone to have real conversations with. I knew that if I wanted to become fluent, I needed to practice having longer, more natural conversations. But I was still too scared to talk to strangers, so I came up with a solution. I would talk to myself. At first, it felt weird. I would walk around my apartment talking to myself in English about everything. My day, my dreams, my favorite movies, my worries. I would ask myself questions and answer them. I would have imaginary conversations with friends, family, even strangers. For example, I would say, then I would answer, I'm good. Thank you. I slept well last night, and I'm ready to practice my English. I would say, "What are you going to do today?" And answer, "I'm going to practice speaking for Senchifinjon Utes. Then I'm going to the cafe. And then I'm going to watch an English movie without subtitles." It sounds silly, but it worked. Talking to myself allowed me to practice having natural conversations, without the pressure of being judged. I could speak freely, make mistakes, and experiment with new words and sentences. I made it a daily habit every evening. I would spend Arshafinjon Utes talking to myself in English. I would pick a topic and just keep speaking. No script, no preparation, just natural, free and flowing conversation. Sometimes I would talk about my day, sometimes I would talk about my goals, sometimes I would even argue with myself in English about whether I should eat ice cream or not. As the days went by, I noticed a change. My conversations became longer, more detailed, and more natural. I could just speak, and the words would come one day. I was talking to myself about my favorite movie, I said. "I watched The Shawshank Redemption last night. It's my favorite movie because it's about hope and perseverance. Even when things are hard, you have to keep going. I think that's a good lesson for learning English too. You have to keep trying, even when it's difficult." I stopped and listened to myself. I had spoken for over a minute, without pausing, without thinking too hard, without making too many mistakes. It felt natural. It felt easy. That's when I realized talking to myself wasn't just practice. It was training my brain to think in English, to express my thoughts freely, to speak without fear. It was helping me build the habit of speaking English every day, even when there was no. I would play them back later and listen to myself. I would notice things I could improve, like my pronunciation, my grammar, or my tone. But I would also notice how much I had grown. I could hear the confidence in my voice, the fluency in my sentences, the joy in my words. By the end of the second week, I was feeling more confident than ever. I could talk to myself for Senchifinjon Utes without stopping. I could have short conversations with the barista. I could speak slowly, clearly, and without fear of mistakes. But I still hadn't spoken to a stranger, someone I didn't see every day. I knew that if I wanted to take my English to the next level, I needed to step out of my comfort zone. I needed to talk to someone new. One Saturday afternoon, I went to the park. It was a beautiful day, and there were a lot of people around. I saw a foreign girl sitting on a bench reading a book. She looked friendly, and she was alone. I took a deep breath, gathered all my courage, and walked over to her. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing, and I wanted to turn around and run. I stood in front of her and said, slowly and clearly, "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" She looked up, smiled, and said, "No, it's not. Please sit down." I sat down, trying to calm my nerves. I said, "Thank you, I'm Lisa. I'm learning to speak English, so I'm trying to practice talking to new people." She smiled again and said, "That's great. I'm Emma. I'm from Canada. I've been in this city for a month, and I'm still learning the language too." We started talking. We talked about the park, about our favorite foods, about our hobbies, about our experiences learning new languages. I made mistakes, lots of them. I mispronounced words. I used the wrong grammar. I paused mid-Jan sentence. But Emma didn't care. She listened patiently. She corrected me gently when I asked her to. And she kept the conversation going. We talked for over Senchifinjon Utes. By the end of the conversation, I wasn't nervous anymore. I was having fun. I was speaking English freely, without overthinking, without fear. It felt amazing. When I said goodbye to Emma, she said, "You speak English really well. You're very brave for practicing with strangers. Keep it up." I walked home with a big smile on my face. I had spoken to a stranger in English, and it was okay. It was more than okay. It was wonderful. I had proven to myself that I could do it, that I wasn't just good at speaking English alone, but that I could have real conversations with real people. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Today, I spoke to a stranger in English. It was scary at first, but it was the best feeling in the world. I realized that people are kind, And they don't care if you make mistakes. They just care that you're trying. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm ready to speak to the world. After talking to Emma, I started having more conversations with strangers. I talked to people at the cafe, at the park, at the library. I even talked to the cashier at the grocery store. But I noticed something. Sometimes, I would run out of words. I would be in the middle of a conversation, and I would pause, and the conversation would get awkward. I didn't want to go back to being silent. I didn't want to let awkward pauses ruin my conversations. So I started to pay attention to how native speakers talk. I watched English movies and TV shows. I listened to podcasts, and I noticed something. Native speakers use fillers to keep the conversation going when they don't know what to say next. Fillers are simple words or phrases that don't mean much, but they fill the silence and give you time to think. Words like, well, you know, like, and sort of. At first, I thought fillers were bad. I thought they made people sound unconfident. But I soon realized that fillers are a natural part of speaking. They make conversations sound more casual, more natural, and less forced. I started practicing using fillers in my self-gen conversations. For example, if I didn't know what to say next, I would say, well, let's see. Or I've never thought about that before. Or like, it's hard to explain, but I also practiced using fillers in my conversations with strangers. One day, I was talking to a guy at the library about books. He asked me, "What's your favorite book?" I didn't know what to say right away, so I said, "Well, that's a good question. Let me think. I think my favorite book is To Kill a Mockingbird. I read it when I was in high school, and it really changed my perspective." The filler. "Well, that's a good question. Let me think." Gave me time to remember my favorite book and organize my thoughts. It kept the conversation going, and it didn't sound awkward. I started collecting fillers and practicing them every day. I made a list of my favorite ones. Well, like, sort of, let me think, actually. Anyway, using fillers changed everything for me. They made my conversations more natural, more casual, and less stressful. I no longer had to worry about running out of words, because I had fillers to fill the silence. I no longer felt pressured to have the perfect answer, because fillers gave me time to think. One day, I was talking to Emma again. She asked me, "How's your English practice going?" I said, "I've been practicing every day, and I've been talking to a lot of strangers. Like, it's still hard sometimes, but I'm getting better. You know, I used to be so scared to speak, but now I actually enjoy it." Emma laughed and said, "That's awesome. You sound so natural now. I can barely tell you're learning." Fillers didn't just help me keep the conversation going. They helped me sound more like a native speaker. They helped me feel more confident, more relaxed, and more comfortable in my own skin. After mastering fillers, my conversations became longer and more natural. But I still had a goal. I wanted to be able to speak English for Senchifindon without stopping. Not just talking to myself. I knew that Senchifindon was a big goal, but I was ready to challenge myself. I started with Wufindon then then Shiwu. Every day, I would find someone to talk to, Emma, the barista, a stranger at the park, and I would try to speak to them for a little longer than the day before. At first, it was hard. I would get tired. I would run out of things to say. I would pause too much, but I kept going. I would pick a topic I was passionate about, like movies, music, or travel, and I would talk about it as much as I could. I would use fillers when I needed to. I would make mistakes, and I would keep speaking. We talked about our favorite places, our dream trips, the best food we had ever eaten while traveling. I spoke about my dream to study abroad in England, about how I wanted to visit London, Oxford, and Cambridge. I spoke about my fear of flying, but how I was willing to overcome it to see the world. I kept speaking and speaking and speaking. I didn't check the time. I didn't worry about mistakes. I just talked. and Emma listened. When I finally stopped, she said, "Wow, you've been speaking for sensual finjon yut straight. That's amazing." I couldn't believe it. I had spoken English for sensual finjon yuts without stopping. I had had a real, natural conversation with a real person. And it had lasted longer than I ever thought possible. That night, I recorded myself talking about my conversation with Emma. I listened to the recording, and I was shocked. My voice was confident. My sentences were fluent. My tone was natural. I sounded like someone who had been speaking English for years, not someone who had been too scared to say a single word. 30 minutes of uninterrupted speaking taught me two things. First, practice makes perfect. The more I spoke, the easier it became. Second, passion fuels fluency. When I talked about something I loved, the words came easily, and I forgot about my fear. I started making it a goal to have at least one senshi 10-minute conversation in English every week. Sometimes it was with Emma. Sometimes it was with a stranger. Sometimes it was even with myself. But every time, I felt more confident, more fluent, and more proud of myself. As I kept practicing, I continued to record my voice, my self-dan conversations, my conversations with strangers, my senshi 10-minute challenges. I would save these recordings and listen to them every week. I would cringe at my mistakes, at my shaky voice, at my awkward pauses. But I forced myself to keep listening, because I knew that listening to my progress was the best way to stay motivated. I wanted to see how far I had come. One week, I listened to a recording from Day E, the first time I had spoken to my reflection. My name is Lisa. It was shaky, quiet, and full of fear. Then I listened to a recording from that day, a senshi 10-minute conversation with Emma, full of confidence, fluency, and joy. The difference was night and day. I cried when I heard it. Not because I was sad, but because I was proud. I was proud of how far I had come, proud of the courage I had found, proud of the voice I had discovered. I started to make a progress playlist of my recordings. Every time I felt discouraged, every time I wanted to give up, I would listen to the playlist. I would hear my voice get stronger, my sentences get smoother, my confidence grow. It reminded me that all my hard work was paying off, that I was capable of more than I thought. I also started to share my recordings with a friend who was also learning English. She would listen to them and give me feedback, what I did well, what I could improve. It was helpful, but more than that, it was encouraging. We would cheer each other on, celebrate each other's progress, and remind each other that we weren't alone. Listening to my progress taught me an important lesson. Growth is not always obvious. It's small, it's slow, it's incremental. But if you take the time to look back, you'll see how far you've come. And that progress, no matter how small, is worth. One day, I listened to a recording from Day Shi. I was talking to myself about my day, and I kept pausing, kept correcting myself, kept sounding nervous. Then I listened to a recording from that day, and I could barely believe it was the same person. I was speaking freely, confidently, and without fear. I had changed. And that change was real. By Day Arshawu, I had built a lot of good habits. Slow, clear speaking, embracing mistakes, talking to myself, using fillers, having long conversations, and recording my progress. But I wanted to make these habits permanent. I wanted to turn my daily practice into a routine that I could keep doing, even after I had reached my goal of fluency. So I created a daily routine, a Sishawu 10-minute routine that I would do every morning, without fail. I called it my English growth routine, and it became the most important part of my day. Here's what my routine looked like. Step Yi Fei Shu minutes of mirror speaking. Confidence building, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, Tingzhi Yao Bei, and spoke Wu positive sentences about my English journey. I said them slowly, clearly, and with confidence. I am getting better at English every day. I am brave enough to speak. I embrace my mistakes. I speak with clarity and fluency. I am proud of my progress. This helped me start the day with a positive mindset and build the confidence I needed to speak. Step R Fei Shi minutes of slow, clear sentences. I picked Wu sentences about my daily life and practiced saying them slowly, clearly, without rushing. I focused on pronunciation and clarity, making sure every word was heard. For example, I brush my teeth every morning. I drink a glass of water before breakfast. I take the bus to work. I eat lunch at 4 o'clock. I practice English every evening. Step 7. Face your minutes of self-Jan conversation. I talk to myself about a random topic. My dreams, my hobbies, my favorite movie, or even my plans for the day. I used fillers when I needed to, made mistakes, and kept speaking without correcting myself. This helped me practice natural, free Jan flowing conversation. Step C. Face your minutes of listening and shadowing. I listened to a short English podcast or a clip from a movie, and I shadowed it, repeating what the speaker said, copying their tone, their speed, and their emotion. This helped me improve my pronunciation and my fluency, and it made my speaking sound more natural. Step Wu Fei Wu minutes of progress reflection. I listened to a recording from the previous week and reflected on my progress. I wrote down one thing I did well and one thing I could improve. This helped me stay focused and motivated, and it allowed me to track my growth. This routine was simple, but it was powerful. It kept me consistent. I did it every morning, even on days when I was tired, even on days when I didn't feel like it, because I knew that consistency was the key to fluency. After just days of this routine, I noticed a big difference. My speaking was more fluent, my confidence was higher, and I was more comfortable speaking to strangers. I no longer had to force myself to practice. It became a habit, a part of my daily life. I realized that fluency isn't something you achieve once and then forget about. It's a habit. It's something you work on every day, even when you think you're good enough. And this routine helped me turn that habit into a permanent part of my life. On day censure, something amazing happened. I was invited to a language exchange event at a local CAC. It was a gathering of people from all over the world. People learning English, people learning Chinese, people learning Spanish. Everyone was there to practice speaking, to make friends, and to have fun before the event. I was nervous. I had never been to a language exchange. I was scared that I would freeze, that I would make mistakes, that I wouldn't be able to keep up with the conversations. But as I walked into the cafe, I took a deep breath and reminded myself of all the hard work I had done over the past censure days. I reminded myself of the first time I had spoken to my reflection, of the first time I had talked to a stranger, of the first time I had spoken for Senshifenjon Utes without stopping. I reminded myself that I was brave, that I was capable, that I was ready. I walked up to a group of people who were speaking English. They smiled and invited me to join. I sat down, took a deep breath, and opened my mouth. And this time, there was no fear, no shaking hands, no tight throat, just calm, confidence, and a desire to speak. I talked to them about my English journey. I told them about how I had been too scared to speak, about how I had practiced every day, about how I had overcome my fear of mistakes. I talked about my dreams of studying abroad, about my favorite English movies, about the friends I had made along the way. I spoke for over Senshifenjon Utes. I made mistakes. I used fillers. I paused sometimes, but I didn't care. I was having fun. I was speaking freely. I was being myself. At the end of the conversation, one of the people in the group said, "Lisa, you speak English so well. I can't believe you were scared to speak just a month ago. You're an inspiration." I smiled, and I felt a wave of pride and joy wash over me. I had done it. I had gone from hiding in silence to speaking without fear. I had gone from being too scared to say a single word to having a 60-minute conversation with a group of strangers. I had broken the jaswad of fear, and I had found my voice. That night, I sat by the window, just like I had done censure days earlier. But this time, I wasn't sad or scared. I was happy. I was grateful. I was proud. If you're reading this, and you're scared to speak English, I want you to know something. You are not alone. I was just like you. I was scared, I was insecure. I was convinced that I would never be able to speak fluently. But I learned that fluency is not about being perfect. It's about being brave. It's about speaking, even when you're scared. It's about embracing your mistakes, about practicing every day, about never giving up. Fluency is not a gift. It's a choice. A choice to show up every day, to practice, to be brave, to keep going, even when it's hard. I didn't become fluent in censure days, but I became brave. I became confident. I became someone who wasn't afraid to speak her truth in English. And that's the real victory. Not perfect English, but the courage to speak no matter what. Today, I still practice my English every day. I still make mistakes. I still have moments of fear, but I no longer let fear control me. I no longer hide in silence. I speak up. I use my voice. And I encourage you. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And your English doesn't have to be perfect to be heard. You just have to be brave enough to open your mouth and speak. So start today. Speak one sentence. Speak one word. Even if it's shaky, even if it's wrong, just speak. Because every word you say is a step toward freedom. Every word you say is a step toward fluency. Every word you say is a step toward becoming. You are capable. You are brave. You can do this. And I'm right here with you, cheering you on every step of the way.